if I'm certain of one thing, it is that your conclusion will not disappoint.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about Season 3 of What If, which I think turned out to be one of the biggest disappointments of the multiverse saga. I'll explain why Seasons 1 and 2 worked so well, and then what went wrong behind the scenes. And I'm not going to be nice. In my opinion, Marvel squandered a show that could have easily run for the next 20 or 30 years. So back in 2019, right after Endgame, Marvel announced all of their new Disney Plus shows at Comic-Con. And of all the shows they announced, I was most excited for What If. The What If comics are some of my favorites. Now, I'm not saying they're all great, some of them outright suck, but some of these comics were masterpieces. Oh, but why? Well, Marvel and DC have always had this rule that creators couldn't change too much. Heroes always had to revert to their natural self. Peter Parker struggles to balance his dual identities, Captain America always does the right thing, Batman's always a tortured soul, but in the pages of What If, we got to see some brilliant creators like Frank Miller get a chance to cut loose for 22 pages, and the stories they would deliver were often dark or funny, but they were all, at their best, character-driven stories. Now, at times, these creators would riff on specific stories like Daredevil Born Again, or sometimes they would take a small event and say like maybe Aunt May died instead of Uncle Ben. And there are other standouts from the canon of What If, like what if the Phoenix didn't die and then she ends up killing the X-Men, which again was written and drawn by Frank Miller. Or there's a great one when the Punisher becomes Venom and we see Frank Castle's personality actually take over the symbiote. The one constant of the best stories was that we got to see how our favorite characters would have reacted under wildly different circumstances. The best What If stories always put character ahead of circumstance. And in the show, this is why some episodes worked better than others. For instance, the episode where Doctor Strange destroys a reality is character-driven, whereas the episode where Shang-Chi is in the Old West is circumstance-driven. It's not that we get to see Shang-Chi's character change, we just get to see Shang-Chi in the Old West. But I should also mention that What If stories were also great because they could throw us into worlds that were radically changed, like where Wolverine became king of a vampire planet, or there's Old Man Logan, which is kind of a What If story, which depicts a future where the villains have won and Wolverine lives as a hermit in the desert, blaming himself. That story gave us the movie Logan, which is, the greatest comic book movie of all time. But mostly, these comics were filled with carnage and bloodshed that we would have never ever gotten to see in a book in the real universe. I mean, come on, Marvel Zombies. I thought Season 1 was a solid start to bringing this premise to the MCU. Showrunner Ashley Bradley was Marvel's secret weapon, and she wrote so many standout episodes. Like, out of the first 9 episodes, she's credited on 6 of them, including the creation of Captain Carter, and the best episode of the series, What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. Now, Bradley was unafraid to push this show to its limits, and to take heroes like Doctor Strange and turn them into villains. I mean, hell, she murdered the Avengers in Episode 3, and did it with flair, making the Hulk explode like a marshmallow stuck in a microwave during a sleepover. And in Episode 1, she did a great job leading the audience into this premise.
There. That's the moment that created a new universe.
In that pilot episode, we get to see how Peggy and Steve, even with their roles reversed, are still just Peggy and Steve. Now, if you really want to know... Oh my god.
Greetings!
Are you an alien?
Yes, I am Gorlock from planet Gorlock.
So how does that work? Are you named after your planet, or...
My mission is to travel the vastness of the cosmos to bring you word of galactic peace, and I have... What is that divine fragrance?
Don't look at me, man. I just rode around in 5 dead birds.
Oh, well, I guess it's me. I am wearing cologne.
I have passed through the frothy nebulae of Metallus Prime, and yet my senses have never perceived such glory.
Oh, thanks. It's called Sirens and Sailors by Juicebox. It's a high-end cologne, but I was able to get it for just $8 a month through Scentbird. They're the sponsor of this video.
Ah, tell me more of this Scentbird.
Sure. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service, and if you're new to wearing cologne, it's a great way to start because you don't have to waste hundreds of dollars on an expensive bottle. So before Scentbird, I never wore cologne, but now it's become an important part of my morning routine to help me express my personality. I shower, I get spruced up, and then the finishing touch is a bit of cologne. Now, to educate me about the cologne, they send along a descriptive card that explains the ingredients. For instance, this month, my favorite is Pour Homme by Dolce & Gabbana. It's got lavender, tobacco, and sage, and it's perfect for date nights. Now, these samples are actually 8 times bigger than the normal sample size you would get in a store.
May I take this sample to my people?
Sure thing. I get to choose a new designer fragrance every month for just $17. You get a 30-day supply, and then you get to pick what you want to receive, so there are no surprises. Guys, this is a great, affordable way to learn about cologne. Plus, you can skip any month with no penalties. So if you want to give Scentbird a try, click this QR code and use our code SCREEN2 and click the link in the description to get 55% off. That's just over $7 for your first month, available in the USA and Canada. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video, and check out our sample links below.
And now I will return to my world to bring my people word of this Scentbird.
Wait, I thought you were going to bring peace to mankind.
Now, like I was saying, Season 1 had banger after banger. Marvel Zombies, Killmonger teaming up with Tony Stark, Space T'Challa, and as I mentioned earlier, the Strange Supreme story, I think, is the best of the entire series. This episode took advantage of Steven's obsessive impulses that we saw in the movies. Steven always desires to be the best, to achieve his goals at all costs. And the brilliance of this episode is that it doesn't start with the premise, it starts with Steven. What would happen if you took a brilliant, obsessive man like Stephen Strange and then gave him nothing to lose? Like I said, the best what-if stories always revert back to character and bloodshed. I should also praise some great episodes in Season 2, like the Bradley penned episode about Tony Stark landing on Sakaar, or the Nebula film noir that opened up the season. And not for nothing, guys, Bradley also wrote 2 of the best episodes of Season 3, with the Red Guardian teaming up with the Winter Soldier, and the Mech Avengers Hulk Kaiju episode. But as much as I like Season 1, it did lay the groundwork for the downfall of this show: serialization.
Oh, you mean like when you eat all kinds of cereals in the same bowl and then your stomach hurts?
No, serialization is when one episode of a show is built to lead into the next. For some reason, they decided that Captain Carter was going to be the main character of this series. But the What If comics are mostly one-off anthology stories. They're like the Twilight Zone, where every week we get a different haunting premise. And the Watcher is there to narrate these stories, like a big, baby-headed Rod Serling. Now, there were a couple of arcs in the comics where variants from different universes banded together, but for the most part, those stories didn't work. The premise of the book was to show character-driven stories that would take us out of our comfort zone. Now, it's important for you non-comic readers to understand that the Watcher has been around for more than 60 years, and for the vast majority of his stories, he really does just watch. He has only interfered very, very rarely. So the decision to make this show about the Watcher becoming a hero and having a change of heart, that robs him of everything that made him interesting. Uatu is an all-powerful god who could shape events in any universe however he wants. So if someone like that is suddenly on the good guy's side now, well then how can the good guys ever possibly lose? The Watcher suddenly having a face turn robs this universe and this franchise of its stakes. In the comics, the Watcher does observe infinite realities, but this makes him realize that lives are essentially without value because, well, there's an infinite amount of lives in the multiverse. That is what makes Uatu a compelling narrator. He is impartial, like Rod Serling narrating different episodes of The Twilight Zone.
This is not a new world. It is simply an extension of what began in the old one.
But in the final season of What If, the Watcher does a full babyface turn, which would be like if Rod Serling suddenly helped all of those characters in the Twilight Zone to have happy endings.
Well, wait, but he interfered in Season 1, and you just said Season 1 was good.
Yes, but he only interfered in Season 1 because he screwed up. He was narrating when Ultron heard him. Still the biggest jump scare in the show, by the way.
I see you.
Now, because Uatu made Ultron aware of his presence, he had to clean up his mess. This made the Guardians of the Multiverse arc feel special because they were a one-off. But then they brought back Captain Carter and Strange Supreme for the finale of Season 2, which then set a precedent. The show was going to have a through line of Uatu and Peggy Carter's friendship. So this set a precedent for the serialization that overtook the series in its last 2 episodes. So let's talk about Season 3. Most of the episodes this season were just plain bad. Like, I don't like being that harsh, but it's true. Like I said earlier, Kaiju Hulk worked because it took a simple diverging point and then gave us a fun premise to like mash up different genres. And I guess the Agatha episode was fun, you know, to see her interact with Howard Stark, but the idea that she pulls the Eternals' powers away makes no sense because they're space robots and she drains power from magic users. But then I started to notice that Season 3 was doubling down on using characters from phases 4 and 5. Now look, I think these phases have introduced some really promising characters, like the Eternals or Shang-Chi or Ms. Marvel, but in the great vastness regardless of the multiverse, these are not the only characters I want to see what if stories about. They even included characters that haven't been properly introduced, like Riri Williams and the Hood. I don't know, wouldn't you have rather seen a story about what if Captain America was thawed out in the 60s and fought in Vietnam, or like what if the Hex kept expanding in WandaVision, or like what if Project Insight and the Winter Soldier had succeeded? To me, the low point of this series was episode 5, What If the Emergence Had Happened. Like, on paper, I was so excited for this episode. It's such a great premise. Earth has been destroyed, and there's a few scattered refugees who managed to survive. Would the Eternals try to take their revenge on the Celestials? Would Star-Lord return to Earth? Season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. actually explored a similar premise, with the Kree essentially enslaving the human survivors of an event that devastated the Earth. So, with all of those fun possibilities, they gave us beat-level characters like Wong, Okoye, Valkyrie, alongside Riri Williams. Now look, I like all of those characters, but they're not headliners. In a universe where you could see any Marvel character, why would they insist on using this particular group? I think it was because the studio mandated that they hype up this next generation of stars. And how in the world do we take a con man like Quentin Beck and make him the dictator of an entire planet? It is such a huge leap for his character that it doesn't feel like a what-if story, it feels like fan fiction. Quentin Beck always wanted respect and fame, not responsibility and power. Not to mention how they did nothing with the White Vision. I mean, come on. This guy is running around out there trying to work out who he is. He's got all the memories of Mind Stone Vision, and all you can do is make him a mind-controlled robot? Everything about this episode was a waste of great characters and a great premise. Even the moment when Riri kills her friends because of one of Mysterio's illusions, well, that's lifted from a much better what-if story, Old Man Logan. And if the Earth was destroyed, there would be no atmosphere on the fragments of Earth. Everybody would have been burned alive. They could have just done, what if Mysterio took over Stark Industries and conquered the Earth, and I would have bought that premise more than I would the Emergence. There is nothing about the Emergence that would suddenly make Quentin Beck take control of the world. Because if you were going to do a story about Quentin Beck taking over the world, wouldn't you rather see him go up against, like, Rhodey? You know, the guy who Tony Stark once entrusted with his legacy? This whole episode, and most of this season, feels like the studio gave the writers a mandate to create stories with the newer characters, and then they used the manatees from the Family Guy writer's room to create a premise. Kind of like a Mad Libs game, where you have to take 3 things that have nothing in common and then make them fit together. The Emergence, Riri Williams, and Quentin Beck. Go. But the final 2 episodes are where I finally realized that this show no longer had any idea of what it was actually about. So let's talk about Marvel's worst, most boring finale since Secret Invasion. So the final season had this subplot of the Watcher having a moral crisis and deciding that he wants to help people, which, as I explained, is not who the Watcher is and takes away the one thing that makes him interesting. It's like if Wolverine went to therapy, worked through his trauma, and then they tried to do 100 issues where he's just a barista. It's boring. So the last arc begins when Peggy shows up with her new team to defeat the Squid Monster from the first episode of the show. And right away, you probably felt like something was off. Instead of working with established heroes from different episodes throughout the show, you know, like the Guardians of the Multiverse, she's fallen in with a seemingly random group of people. So let's run through her team members. There's Kahori, an original character created for the show that Peggy met in season 2. Okay, fine. And then there's Birdie, voiced by the great Natasha Lyonne, who, like, I love.
Or what the heck is a birdie?
Well, this goes back to serialization. In the first season, there was a comedic episode where Thor threw a big party all around Earth, and Howard the Duck and Darcy hit it off.
Want some half-price nachos?
Okay, fine, Duck. But this is not a date.
Let's just see where this evolves.
And in episode 4 this season, it's revealed that they're still together and that they have an egg that is rumored to be of cosmic importance.
So the 2 of them did a kissy until they made an egg? Ew.
Yeah, it's weird, man. Like, the 1986 Howard the Duck movie was a big bomb, in part because of the weird sexual tension between Leah Thompson and a duck puppet.
You think I might find happiness in the animal kingdom, Ducky?
Like they say, Val, love's strange.
So this show, I guess, thought it would be funny to double down on that cringe idea of Kat Dennings getting it on with a mallard. And then they doubled down by revealing that their daughter is like a metal human duck hybrid. It's weird and off-putting. So, not a fan of that character. And then we get Storm as the Goddess of Thunder.
Oh, I missed that episode. What, did Thor die and she got to lift the hammer?
No, there was no episode. The show creators had the entire X-Men catalog to choose from, and rather than, say, doing an episode where Wolverine becomes Captain America, or an episode where Professor X joins Magneto, they gave us a throwaway version of Storm with Mjolnir. But the problem with this new edition is it's not rooted in character. Like I said, all the best what-if stories that I mentioned earlier stemmed from character choices, where people are forced into different circumstances. But we don't get to see what made this version of Storm different. The show creators just said, hey, you know what'd be cool? Storm with a hammer. But it wasn't cool. It was pandering fan service and borderline insulting. Although, it is always great to have Allison Seeley-Smith back to voice Storm.
I am Storm, goddess of thunder.
Now look, yes, Storm as the goddess of thunder is cool for a second, but because there's no backstory for us to engage with, this is just like Tumblr fan art. And we're constantly told that this group of people are friends and that they've had all these adventures.
But for you, this is probably just another day at the office, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But that doesn't actually mean anything. We need to see those adventures. I feel like the show was always planning on assembling an Exiles team like this, but when they got word that they were canceled, they accelerated the plans into this miserable finale. But I'll talk about why they canceled the show a little bit later in the video. So before I move on to the rest of the finale, I want to address something that Season 3 director Brian Andrews said. In an interview with Agents of Fandom, he claimed that What If didn't use more mutants because they were not aware that the Disney-Fox deal was done, which sounds ludicrous because it is. What If Season 3 was being produced by Marvel Animation at the same time the same studio was creating X-Men 97? You know, a show that uses the X-Men characters. And famously, the showrunner of that show, Bo DeMaio, was fired for allegedly doing some really creepy stuff. So DeMaio replied to Andrew's statement and said that it was absolute bullshit. They were very aware of the rights. We had convos. Absolutely bullshit. Again, just liars. And DeMaio went on to say that they told the What If team that they could pretty much use any character from X-Men that they wanted.
So why didn't they use the X-Men?
I think it's because Marvel Studios wanted them to use the live-action characters from phases 4, 5, and 6. But I don't want to get into a he said, she said thing here. I'm just pointing this out to show you guys how dysfunctional it seems like Marvel Studios was behind the scenes. And how I think this led to us getting a quick throwaway of Storm as a goddess of thunder instead of an actual episode telling us that story. It just feels like a lukewarm compromise. That's why the Team of Exiles does not work for me. So let's talk about that final act, where the main event the show has been building towards is saving the Watcher. I do not care about the Watcher. He is not interesting. He is an all-powerful cosmic god who sits in front of his TV all day. His function is to narrate and facilitate interesting stories from interesting characters. To once again compare it to the Twilight Zone, I never once watched an episode of that show and thought, oh, but tell me more about that smoking man in the suit. So the quest to save the Watcher is inherently boring because the character is designed to be boring. He's a facilitator of better stories.
Like the guy in High Maintenance.
Exactly. So everything about these two episodes begins from a fundamentally flawed premise. Although I will say that bringing back Infinity Ultron brings the character a full circle, but bringing him back ultimately went nowhere. Infinity Ultron is just a pawn on the chessboard who gets wiped out immediately and just buys the others a tiny bit of time. Frankly, you could have done these two episodes and not included him at all. So that leads into the big stupid fight that ended this series. And what an incredibly well animated, boring ass fight this is. This final episode is filled with big speeches, punctuated by all-powerful gods bashing into each other. Now, I like a good fight, but when you're dealing with invincible cosmic beings, the stakes are meaningless. It's like when Agatha fought a Celestial just by punching him in space. There's no imagination to that whatsoever. This is just Looney Tunes characters bashing each other on the head. There's never any weight to this battle. And I'm not saying that because it's animated. Compare this to the excellent X-Men 97 episode Remember It, where we are forced to watch a mutant genocide occur in front of our very eyes. And you get the feeling these are real characters. They bleed. They can really get hurt. And I got none of that from the What If finale. I do not know who any of these people are, so there are no stakes. I don't care who gets to watch the universe. I just want to see Baron Zemo go off and kill every superhero on Earth. This was the most boring fight in the entire history of the MCU, which is a franchise that included this. And the most insulting scene is when the Watchers try to erase the variants of the heroes in every reality. Then we get glimpses of much cooler stories. Kahori is a Horseman of Apocalypse, Peggy Carter as a Black Knight, Storm as the ruler of Wakanda, and finally, after the whole business with the other Watchers is settled, the end credits give us even more glimpses at a better show. Six-Armed Spider-Man, Samurai Ghost Rider, Blade as Moon Knight, damn it all to hell. This is like if Secret Invasion would have ended with artwork of the Avengers fighting an army of of Skrulls.
Well, geez, so what the heck happened to this show?
Well, Ashley Bradley left the show after season 2, and then it all seemed to go downhill. Now, the director of the first 2 seasons, Mazzio, took over. So I think that Chauncey was probably given an impossible task. He was told to use characters from phases 4, 5, and 6 and to wrap up this show as fast as possible.
Yeah, but why? You said the show could run for 20 years.
Dude, I think it's because Marvel is trying to get the hell out of the multiverse saga ASAP. Daniel RPK has said that everything they're developing now takes place in phases 7 and beyond. And they've only got like 2 multiverse projects left to announce. You can see this intention all over these last 2 episodes. Like for instance, we see that the Exiles have been stealing Kang's time chairs. And it's easy to imagine that when they planned out the arc of this show that Kang was going to be a big part of it. Like Marvel originally wanted Jonathan Majors to be all over this saga. And then of course later they yanked him out like an infected tooth. But Kang's gear was left behind. See, I think that Kang was originally going to be a through-line antagonist of this show, but then they ended up swapping him out for the Watchers. Or maybe Uatu was going to step in to stop Kang, and then that would have caused a disagreement with his bosses. But when you take Kang away from the multiverse saga and you replace him with Dr. Doom, suddenly Marvel's in a rush to get to Doom as fast as possible, and you don't want to introduce Doom in an animated show. Now all of this is a shame because this show could have run as an anthology series well beyond the multiverse saga. These stories could have continued to feature characters introduced in the Mutant Saga and, you know, whatever's next after that. Like hell, if they wanted to do a multi-arc epic story like this finale, then they could have just given us a comic-accurate Secret Invasion story where the Skrulls fight the Avengers.
Oh man, that would have been awesome.
I know, there is an army of writers in Hollywood who would be lining up for a shot at writing an episode of this show, and Marvel just squandered the premise. And I think this series should have ended on a really, really dark cliffhanger, because the best what-if stories are the ones that left you hanging. You know, stories that end with you saying, "What's next?" instead of "What the f***?"
I hate that ScreenCrush and Ryan Airy. You see, Paul from the Heavy Spoilers channel, I also hate small dogs because obviously I'm a bad person. Now I know something that's really gonna get them. I'm gonna send them to a far away, far distant city where they can never come back. I'm sending them to
Houston, Texas.
Well, I don't know, boss. That seems kind of mean.
Shut up or I'll give you a fresh one. Now activate the Destructo Beam.
Wow, are we in Houston, Texas? That's right, everyone. We are on tour. On January 20th, we will be in Houston, Texas, and on the 22nd, we are going to be in Dallas. You can meet me and the team live and in person. We're going to do exclusive breakdowns, special guests, fake celebrity dream sequences, and you can only see this stuff live and on stage. Best of all, though, we get to just meet you face to face, you know, and hang out. The full tour details with links to buy are below. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video, and check out our sample links below. So what did you think of Season 3 of What If? Am I overreacting? Let me know in the comments, or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, or Threads. Or you can find me on our free-to-join Discord server. I'm on all the time, and it's a ton of fun. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.